Kate Jones, a nurse with over 10 years of experience, used to feel proud when she donned her white uniform and walked through the doors of St. George Hospital. People knew her as a dedicated and passionate professional. However, lately, the sparkle in Kate's eyes had been fading, suffocated by an increasingly oppressive atmosphere. The cause of this weariness? Dr. Victor Price. He was the kind of doctor that others both feared and admired. Highly competent but also arrogant, Victor knew the power he wielded over everyone around him and used it without scruples. For Kate, the past few months had been a living hell. At first, Victor's glances bothered her, but she ignored them, focusing on her work. However, those glances soon turned into suggestive comments, and what had once been discomfort became an unbearable burden. Kate tried to convince herself that it was just a phase, that Victor would soon lose interest, and she could continue her routine. But each day was a new challenge. With every surgery, every shift alongside Victor, she found herself trapped in a web of anxiety. The hospital, which had once been a refuge, a place where she made a difference in people's lives, had become a prison. "You seem tired, Kate," said Dr. Ellis, a longtime colleague, as they passed each other in the hallway. "Is everything all right?" Kate forced a smile. "Yes, just sleepless nights." Dr. Ellis seemed on the verge of saying more but hesitated. Kate knew he sensed something was wrong, but like everyone else, he preferred not to get involved. It was easier to ignore. At home, the situation wasn't much better. Her father, a retired man and always perceptive, noticed the changes in his daughter. During dinner, he often looked at her with concern. "Kate, are you sure everything's okay at work?" he would ask, his voice full of worry. "It is, Dad. Just a bit of stress." "Nothing to worry about," Kate lied, avoiding his gaze. The last thing she wanted was to worry her father further, especially since she knew he would feel helpless. That afternoon, after a long and complicated surgery, Victor crossed all boundaries. While Kate was adjusting the equipment in the recovery room, Victor approached her from behind, closer than necessary. She felt the familiar discomfort rise up her spine, but this time, he went further. With a quick gesture, he touched her inappropriately, whispering something that made Kate's blood run cold. "This is just between us, Kate. You know how these things work," he murmured with a smile that was more of a threat than a friendly gesture. For a second that felt like an eternity, Kate was paralyzed. She felt anger, disgust, fear, and indignation growing inside her like a storm ready to explode. And then, without thinking about the consequences, she abruptly turned and pushed Victor with force. "Don't you dare come near me again," she shouted, her voice echoing in the empty room. Victor looked at her in shock, a mixture of surprise and anger. The moment of shock quickly dissipated as he composed himself, his eyes narrowing with coldness. "You just made the biggest mistake of your life, Kate." Within an hour, she was in the administration office. Sitting before 3 members of the board, all with stern expressions, she tried to explain what had happened, but her words were cut off. The accusations of insubordination and improper conduct were like a predetermined verdict. Fired was the final word, delivered without any trace of empathy. Kate left the office in a state of shock. Each step she took down the hallway felt heavier than the last. The hospital walls, which had once given her security, now seemed to close in on her, trapping her in a prison from which she was finally being expelled, but not without scars. As she walked through the city streets, Kate felt as if life were in slow motion. The traffic, the people, the city lights, all seemed distant, as if she were in a different world, isolated in her own despair. The sky was beginning to darken, bringing the cold reality of the approaching night. With a mix of shame and anger, Kate thought about what had happened. How could this happen? She repeatedly asked herself. She had devoted herself to the hospital, to her work, to the patients, and all she received in return was a summary dismissal, branded as guilty of something she never wanted. Kate knew she needed to tell her father, but how could she explain? How could she tell him that her career, her source of livelihood, had been destroyed by a single action, a moment when she finally said no? Aimlessly, she found herself sitting on a park bench, still dressed in her nurse's uniform. The world around her kept spinning, but for Kate, everything seemed to have stopped. She didn't know what to do or where to go. She only knew that nothing would be the same again. The next morning, Kate woke up in her small apartment with a feeling of emptiness in her chest. She had spent the night replaying every detail of what had happened at the hospital. The initial shock had turned into a bitter mix of fear and uncertainty about the future. With the dismissal, she not only lost her job but also the stability that sustained her life. After getting ready without the same energy as before, Kate found herself wandering the streets of the city. She couldn't face her father, not yet. She needed time to figure out what to do next. Every street she crossed seemed unfamiliar, as if she were walking through a different city than the one she had known for years. As she walked, trying to organize her thoughts, Kate came across a park she used to see from the bus on her way to the hospital. It was a simple but welcoming place, with wooden benches worn by time and trees that offered shade. Kate decided to sit on one of the benches, hoping that the peaceful environment would help calm her mind. It was then that she noticed a man sitting on the bench next to hers. He was elderly, with a white beard and disheveled hair, dressed in worn clothes and a jacket that seemed too old to protect him from the cold. Unlike other people who passed by him without even noticing his presence, Kate felt a strange connection. Perhaps it was the way he looked at nothing, lost in thought, or the dignity he maintained despite his situation. The man, noticing Kate's gaze, turned to her with a gentle smile. "You seem to be carrying the weight of the world on your shoulders, young lady," he said, his voice hoarse but full of empathy. Kate, who had been keeping to herself, felt a wave of relief upon hearing those words. It was as if someone finally saw her for who she was. "I think I am," she replied with a sigh. "Would you like to talk about it?" he asked without any expectation, only with genuine curiosity. For a moment, Kate hesitated. She wasn't the type to open up easily, especially to a stranger. But there was something about the way this man spoke, the calmness in his voice, that made her want to unburden herself. And so, without planning, Kate began to recount what had happened at the hospital, the weeks of torment she had suffered at the hands of Dr. Victor Price, and how it all culminated in her dismissal. The man, who introduced himself as Arthur, listened attentively without interrupting, only nodding his head from time to time as if absorbing every word. When Kate finished, he remained silent for a few moments, pondering what he had heard. "It's funny how life can knock us down in ways we never imagined," he finally said. "I've been where you are now, feeling like everything I built crumbled all at once." Kate looked at him in surprise. "You too?" "Yes," Arthur replied with a slight smile. "I used to be a lawyer, believe it or not. I had a stable life, a respected career, but one day, everything changed. A series of bad decisions followed by a great loss, and here I am. Arthur's story shocked Kate. She would never have guessed that the man who seemed forgotten by the world had lived such a different life. "And how do you cope with it?" she asked, her voice tinged with curiosity and desperation. Arthur looked up at the sky as if seeking an answer in the slowly passing clouds. "I think we learn to accept the things we can't change. But we also learn to fight for what matters. The important thing is to remember that even in the worst situations, there's always a choice. And sometimes, the fault is the push we need to find a new path." Arthur's words resonated deeply with Kate. For the first time since she left the hospital, she felt a spark of hope. Perhaps this encounter wasn't just a coincidence. Perhaps it was the beginning of something new, something she didn't yet understand but that could guide her to a different, maybe even better, future. The days following Kate's encounter with Arthur were marked by a subtle but significant change in her life. Although she was still unemployed and uncertainties hovered over her future, Kate began to feel that she wasn't as alone as she thought. Arthur's presence in her life, with his wise words and unique perspective, brought a bit of light to the darkness she felt. Kate began to visit Arthur in the park frequently. She would bring coffee, some fruit, and sandwiches for both of them, and they would spend hours talking. The stories Arthur told about his life as a lawyer were fascinating, and Kate often found herself thinking about how unpredictable life could be. What had happened to cause such an intelligent and capable man to end up living on the streets? During one of these conversations, Kate offered Arthur something more than just food. "Arthur, I know you used to be an important man. And even though things are tough now, I'd like to help you feel a bit more like the man you really are. Can I wash your clothes? Maybe tidy up your hair?" Arthur looked at Kate with a touched smile. "You have a good soul, Kate. I accept your offer with gratitude." Kate began washing Arthur's clothes, restoring the color and dignity that seemed to have been lost over time. She also arranged for him to get a haircut, and within days, Arthur began to regain the dignified appearance that matched his posture and wisdom. It was during one of these afternoons that Kate received an unexpected phone call. It was Sarah, a colleague from the hospital who hadn't yet heard the details of Kate's dismissal but had heard rumors about what had happened. "Kate, we need to talk. Strange things have been happening at the hospital since you left," Sarah said with a tone of urgency. They arranged to meet at the cafe where Kate usually met Arthur. When Kate arrived, Sarah was already there, visibly nervous. They hugged and sat down to talk. Sarah began to explain how the atmosphere at the hospital had changed since Kate left. Victor's behavior, which had previously been disguised, was now becoming more evident, affecting other nurses. Several staff members were suspicious that something was wrong, but no one felt safe enough to speak up. "I don't know what to do, Kate," Sarah said, her eyes welling up with tears. "If someone as respected as you was treated this way, imagine what could happen to any of us." As she listened to Sarah's words, Kate felt a mix of anger and sadness. She knew she needed to do something, but she wasn't sure what. It was then that Arthur suddenly appeared at the cafe. He was dressed in the clean clothes Kate had washed, with freshly cut hair. When Sarah saw him, she didn't even notice his current situation. To her, Arthur just seemed like an older man with the wisdom and dignity of a retired lawyer. "Arthur," Kate called, waving for him to join them. "This is Arthur, a friend who's been helping me a lot these past few days." Arthur smiled and sat down with them. "Kate, still uncertain about how to resolve the situation at the hospital, began to explain what Sarah had told her. She told Arthur about Victor, the harassment, and the fear that hung over the nurses. Arthur listened attentively, his eyes growing more serious with each word. When Kate finished, he remained silent for a moment, pondering the situation. "Kate, what's happening at the hospital is wrong. Very wrong. And the fact that they're trying to silence you all only makes things worse. But there's a way to deal with this. You don't have to fight alone." Sarah looked at Arthur, a bit confused. "What do you suggest, sir?" "I suggest you gather evidence. If the nurses and other staff start documenting what's happening, photos, recordings, anything that shows Victor's inappropriate behavior, then you'll have a real chance to expose what's going on and force the hospital to take action." Arthur's words gave Kate and Sarah a new sense of purpose. They knew it wouldn't be easy, but the idea of taking action instead of just accepting the situation brought a new hope. Kate felt that despite all the difficulties, she had found in Arthur not just a friend but a mentor, someone who was willing to guide her at a time when everything seemed to be falling apart. As they parted ways, Kate and Sarah were more confident. They knew they had a long journey ahead, but at least now they had a plan. And with Arthur by their side, they felt they could face whatever came their way. Kate and Sarah knew that gathering evidence against Victor would be a difficult and dangerous task. Victor was an influential doctor at the hospital, and any accusations against him would have to be very well substantiated. But armed with Arthur's guidance and their determination to seek justice, they were ready to face the challenge. The day after their meeting with Arthur, Sarah began to discreetly talk to other nurses and hospital staff. She approached the conversations cautiously, always checking to see if anyone else had experienced something similar to Kate. Most of the nurses shared stories of uncomfortable glances and inappropriate comments, but none of them had concrete evidence or were willing to expose themselves. They feared retaliation, losing their jobs, or even damaging their professional reputations. However, after several attempts, Sarah found a nurse who was visibly shaken. Her name was Emily, and unlike the others, she wasn't just uncomfortable with Victor, she was terrified. Sensing that there was more to Emily's story, Sarah sat down with her in a quiet corner of the cafeteria and encouraged her to open up. "Emily, you can trust me. I know it's hard to talk about this, but if something happened, you don't have to face it alone," Sarah said, her voice soft but firm. Emily hesitated for a moment, looking around to make sure no one was listening. I was harassed by him," she confessed, her voice trembling. "He touched me, said he could help me advance in my career if I gave in." Sarah felt a wave of indignation but remained calm. "Emily, when did this happen? Where?" "It was 2 weeks ago, in the nurses' lounge. I was alone. I should have done something, but I was paralyzed with fear," Emily replied, her eyes filling with tears. Sarah took Emily's hand. "You didn't do anything wrong. But we need to prove what happened so he can't do this to anyone else. Are there cameras in the lounge?" Emily nodded. "Yes, there's a camera in the corner of the room." With this information, Sarah knew they had a real chance. She approached hospital security and requested the footage, claiming that there had been an incident that needed to be reviewed. Fortunately, the request was granted, and Sarah obtained the recordings from the exact day and time Emily had mentioned. When Sarah watched the video, she clearly saw what had happened. Victor was alone with Emily in the nurse's lounge, and his behavior was captured on camera. The footage was clear and undeniable. With this evidence in hand, Sarah returned to the cafe where Kate and Arthur were waiting for her. She was nervous but determined. When she arrived, Kate and Arthur could tell immediately that something important had happened. "You won't believe this," Sarah said, placing the laptop on the table and showing them the video. Kate watched with a mix of relief and anger. They finally had the proof that Victor was the predator everyone feared and that he needed to be stopped. Arthur, with his calm but firm demeanor, guided the two on the next steps. "Now you have what you need. It's time to file the complaint. With this evidence, the hospital will have no choice but to act." Sarah and Kate went to the hospital's Human Resources office, where they filed a formal complaint against Victor, presenting the footage as evidence. They also included statements from other nurses who had suffered from Victor's inappropriate behavior, exposing the hospital's negligence in protecting its employees. The next day, Kate and Arthur were at the cafe, waiting for news about the complaint. Kate was anxious, but Arthur reminded her that they had done the right thing, no matter what happened next. Suddenly, a black limousine pulled up in front of the cafe. Kate and Arthur exchanged confused glances. The limousine door opened, and an elegant woman in her 50s stepped out. Her steps were firm and determined as she approached Kate and Arthur. "Kate Jones," the woman asked with a slight smile on her face. "I'm Megan Stewart, the owner of the hospital network. I believe we have a lot to discuss." Kate's heart raced. Megan's presence indicated that something big was about to happen. Kate watched Megan Stewart with a mix of nervousness and hope as the hospital network owner sat down at the table. Megan had an imposing presence, but her eyes conveyed a sense of understanding and determination. "Kate," Megan began, "I received the formal complaint that you and Sarah filed, and I can't help but express my gratitude for your courage. Unfortunately, Victor Price's behavior is unacceptable, and the hospital failed to protect you, as well as other staff members. After reviewing the evidence, the decision was clear: Victor will be dismissed from the hospital immediately and will face legal action." Kate felt a wave of relief mixed with a bit of surprise. She had expected the investigation to be lengthy and complicated, but Megan's firmness indicated that the situation was being handled with the seriousness it deserved. "I also want to commend you for not staying silent. It's not easy, especially when facing someone like Victor. I'd like to reinstate you at the hospital, but this time in a leadership position where you can help create a safe and fair environment for all employees." Kate was momentarily speechless. The idea of returning to the hospital was something she had never imagined after everything that had happened. "I don't know what to say, Megan. This means so much to me, but I have to share the credit with Sarah, who stood by me throughout the process. And of course, with Arthur," she said, looking at the man beside her. "He was instrumental in this fight. Arthur is a former lawyer." Megan turned to Arthur, offering him a warm smile and extending her hand. "Arthur, it's a pleasure to meet you. I can't thank you enough for your support of Kate. Men like you are rare. Have you ever thought about working as a consultant? Someone with your experience and wisdom would be invaluable to our team." Arthur was visibly moved but maintained his calm demeanor. "Thank you, Megan. I'm happy to know that I could help in some way." After a few more minutes of conversation, Megan stood up, asking Kate to come to the hospital the next morning to discuss the details of her new role. She bid the two farewell with a genuine smile and a word of encouragement before getting back into the limousine and driving away. Kate and Arthur remained seated at the table, absorbing everything that had just happened. The situation seemed almost surreal. "Arthur, I don't even know how to thank you. If it weren't for you, none of this would have happened." Arthur gave a gentle smile. "Kate, you made the hardest choice, which was not to stay silent. I was just here to support you. But maybe this is a chance for me too, to start over. I never imagined my life would take this turn, but perhaps it's time to embrace it." The two continued talking, now with a renewed sense of hope and purpose. The friendship they had built was not just a consequence of the hardships they faced, but a true connection that would change both of their lives forever. Kate woke up early the next morning, feeling a mix of anxiety and determination. After the tumultuous past few days, today was the day she would return to the hospital, but this time in a different position. She knew things would never be the same as before, and she was ready to face this new phase with courage. When she arrived at the hospital, Kate was greeted by Megan Stewart, who was there to personally reinstate her. Megan led Kate to the conference room, where several nurses and other staff members were gathered. The atmosphere was charged with expectation and curiosity, everyone eager to hear what Megan had to say. "Good morning, everyone," Megan began, her voice firm but warm. "We are here today to celebrate the courage of one of our colleagues, Kate Jones, who showed us how important it is to ensure a safe and respectful work environment for all. What happened to Kate and other nurses will not be tolerated in our institution, and we are taking steps to ensure that it never happens again." Megan paused, looking at Kate and smiling with approval. "I am pleased to announce that Kate will be reinstated at our hospital, but now in a new role where she will have the responsibility of ensuring that all employees, especially the nurses, work in an environment free from harassment and discrimination." The applause that followed Megan's words filled the room, and Kate felt a wave of emotion as she realized the support from her colleagues. She knew there was still much work to be done, but this was an opportunity to make a difference and protect others from going through what she had faced. After the ceremony, Kate spent the day familiarizing herself with her new position, organizing meetings, and planning new employee protection policies. In the back of her mind, however, she thought of Arthur and how instrumental he had been in making all this happen. She wanted to do something meaningful for him, someone who, despite having lost so much, still managed to help others in such a grand way. That night, Kate went to the cafe where she used to meet Arthur. When she arrived, he was already sitting in his usual spot, with a calm smile on his face. "How was the first day back?" he asked. "It was incredible," Kate replied, sitting down beside him. "But now I want to repay what you did for me. I want to help you rebuild your life, just as you helped me rebuild mine." Arthur looked at her in surprise. "Kate, you've already done more for me than anyone has in years. You don't need to worry about me. I know you don't expect anything in return, Arthur, but I want to do this. I managed to rent a small apartment for you at a quiet place. And I also spoke with Megan. She wants you to work as a consultant for the hospital network. You don't have to live on the streets anymore. It's time to regain your dignity and start a new chapter of your life." Arthur was silent for a moment, taking in what Kate had said. His eyes filled with tears, something that rarely happened. I don't know what to say, Kate. I never thought something like this would be possible." Kate smiled and took Arthur's hand. "You deserve it, Arthur. And this is just the beginning. We'll face this new phase together. In the days that followed, Arthur moved into the apartment that Kate had found for him. It was modest but comfortable, and he felt a sense of peace that he hadn't experienced in a long time. With Kate's help, he began working as a legal consultant, providing services to, among other clients, the hospital network. Gradually, he regained the confidence and dignity he had lost over the years, realizing that despite his age, he still had much to offer and much to live for as well. Kate, for her part, felt that her life had completely changed. She not only regained her job but also found a new mission. And above all, she gained a true friend in Arthur, someone who would always be by her side, just as she would be by his. Months passed since Kate was reinstated at the hospital and Arthur began his new life as a consultant. The transformation in both of their lives was evident, not only in their routines but also in how they viewed the future. Kate thrived in her new role, using her experiences to create policies that ensured the safety and well-being of all employees. The hospital, under her influence, became recognized as an example of a healthy and respectful environment, and many nurses felt safer knowing they had someone like Kate to support and defend their rights. She had become a true leader, someone who, through her courage, earned the respect and admiration of everyone around her. Arthur, for his part, had settled into his small apartment, which he lovingly decorated with a few belongings that had been recovered from his past. Working as a consultant brought him not only financial stability but also a renewed sense of purpose. He was a different man now, a mentor who was often called upon to help with complex cases at the hospital and who also offered legal advice in other areas. Arthur had finally found the peace he had long sought, and his friendship with Kate only grew stronger. On a sunny morning, Kate and Arthur met at the cafe where it all began. They were sitting together, talking about how their lives had changed since they met. "You know, Kate," Arthur said as he looked at the blue sky above them, "if someone had told me a year ago that I would be here with a job, a home, and true friends, I wouldn't have believed them." Kate smiled, touched. "I think we both learned that life can surprise us, Arthur. And that even in the worst situations, there's always a way out, a chance to start over." Arthur nodded. "You showed me that, Kate. And though I've lost so much, I've also gained something very valuable. Friendship, dignity, and a future." The two remained silent for a moment, enjoying the tranquility of the day. There was no longer the shadow of the past, only the light of a new beginning. As they sipped their coffee, Kate received a message on her phone. It was from Megan Stewart, thanking her for one of the initiatives Kate had implemented at the hospital and asking for her opinion on a new project. Kate responded with a smile, knowing that her journey was just beginning. Arthur, observing the satisfied expression on Kate's face, felt an inner peace he hadn't felt in a long time. He knew there was still much to be done, but now, with Kate by his side and a new outlook on life, he was ready for any challenge that came his way. The friendship between them not only saved them from their own demons but also created an unbreakable bond, showing that even in the most difficult situations, the strength to carry on can come from unexpected places and from people they never imagined meeting. Kate and Arthur's story was, after all, a story of redemption, resilience, and, above all, the beauty of second chances. If you enjoyed the story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, like the video, leave a comment, and check out our next story.